this is Svetlana from Cosplay, and I have an addiction to confess. I cannot stop playing World of Warcraft and creating massive armor and light up weapons. And some people might tell me, get a job, get a life, stop wasting your time, but playing World of Warcraft and cosplay is my job and my life, and Blizzard actually asked me to create a costume for them. For the 20-year anniversary and the release of the next expansion, The War Within, Blizzard asked me to bring the new main villain, Xal'atath the Harbinger, to life. And I instantly fell in love with her. I think Xalatath has one of the most amazing designs in the World of Warcraft universe, and she looks so awesome. And I would also say nobody can resist to massive pauldrons, purple skin and pointy ears. She looks so cool. Plus, I absolutely love combining armor with fabric and add another character to my long list of Blizzard related cosplays. But enough of talking, let's finally get into this project. And before we get into the crafting, let me tell you a bit about Xal'atath and today's sponsor, World of Warcraft. Xal'atath is actually an evil, ancient and mysterious being who seeks for power in the upcoming expansion, The War Within. The game is also getting a ton of new features, including the warbands, a new playable race, the Earthen, and a brand new area, Xal'atath, to explore. I'm especially excited to check out the new story and learn more about Xal'atath. And while she looks really gorgeous and pretty, there are speculations that she actually might be a nasty and massive tentacle monster, an old god. Luckily though, I'm doing her pretty version and don't need to hot glue any slimy parts onto myself. Okay, so let's start this adventure by drawing some patterns for Xal'atath's robe. All I needed for this was some cheap white cotton fabric. With 20 years of crafting experience, I actually became quite confident to drape my patterns completely from scratch. This dummy would help me a lot to guess the amount of fabric I need and the overall shape of the robe. I also drew a quick paper dummy of my evil color, and with everything on the mannequin, I think the result looked pretty good. Benni meanwhile was already working on the armor patterns for me. He actually found the in-game model of Xal'atath online, and this was a huge help. After isolating and simplifying the shoulder armor in Blender, he placed it onto a 3D scan of my body, and with this made me a paper model that I could then print out and tape together. I love being able to work with in-game 3D models, as it makes everything so much more exact and easy. As you can see, my patterns worked out nicely, and with these I was ready to start the real work. I wanted Xal'atath's robe to look heavy and ancient, so I decided to trace everything to a dark grey fabric with a lot of texture. After cutting out the pieces for her top, I pinned them together and ran everything through my sewing machine. While the result looked good, I wasn't super happy with the stiffness of the fabric, so I used just the same material for the lining. The costume might be a little bit warm at the end, but the result looked so much better. Then I turned everything inside out, sewed over the edges again, attached some Velcro tape to the front, and voila, the top of the robe was done. Next to the hips. This was just the same procedure as the top. I traced my patterns, pinned them together, connected the seams, turned it inside out, more pins, more sewing, and looked good. Now I only needed a belt that would hold everything in place. Luckily, I have a pattern for every occasion right here in my shop on cosplay.com, wink wink. As you can see, with the finished belt, it all worked out very nicely. So what was Benni doing in the meantime? Sitting at the PC doing PC stuff. As you can see, he used photos of my hip flappies for the reference and drew all the details that would come on top. These just needed to be printed out, cut out of 5mm EVA foam, dremeled to look rounder and more aged, primed with a few layers of flex bond and airbrushed in golden color. The smaller pieces were actually cut out with our laser cutter. Since we already had the vector drawings, this sped up our work by a lot. After some golden dry brushing by the master himself, Ali Cosplay Props, who kindly helped us out during this project, and a layer of spray varnish, I was ready to glue it all on my fabric. A lot of World of Warcraft costumes actually have these raised golden edges, and in the past I always made them out of fabric. But after seeing Cinderella's version of Xalatath a few weeks ago, I knew we had to build them out of EVA foam as well. It just looked so good. So with a reference blueprint next to me and my trusty fabric glue in hand, I placed everything onto my robe. First onto the hip flappies and afterwards onto the top as well. But then I noticed there was another piece missing for the front, so I sewed this one as well, stuck on the details, and finally, after all these steps, my robe for Xalatath's costume was done. With this out of the way, let's continue with the Pauldrons. It wouldn't be a Mighty WoW cosplay without mighty shoulder armor, right? As I already had my patterns, I was ready to transfer them onto some proper material. However, my shoulder armor would not only need to look good, it also needed to be strong enough to hold my entire cape later. So instead of using EVA foam for the construction, I decided to go with my super old wobbler sandwich method. I used here 2mm EVA foam, cut out some wobbler, heated it up, covered it from both sides and trimmed away the rest. Afterwards, I connected all parts and built up the base of my Pauldrons. For the texture and detail on top, I added another slightly larger 5mm layer of low density EVA foam though. Next on, I used some frog tape to get the patterns for the upcoming details. While I used the 3D model for the base shape, I actually prefer to do everything else pretty much freehand. Also, I absolutely love working with EVA foam, by the way, even though dremeling is quite annoying and messy. And in case you're wondering, I used contact cement glue for pretty much everything in this project. And once the general shape was done, I took my Pauldrons to the sanding table and added a ton of weathering, battle damage and texture onto the surface. You can never have enough battle damage if you're a mysterious ancient being, right? For the attachment, I used some D-rings that were stuck on with a strip of wobbler. But more on that later. First, I needed another smaller Pauldron that would go on top of the large one. Same procedure here though, cutting out the foam, adding more layers, gluing on details, sanding in battle damage. Nothing new here, so far so good. But before the painting could start, we needed to hide the seams first. And after some sanding, we mixed Flex Bond with black acrylic paint and covered all 4 Pauldrons in 3 thick layers of primer. Sealing your foam not only makes your surface nice and smooth, it also helps your paint to stick to it. Doing this for all armor pieces took a while, so we needed some help from Ali Cosplay Props. He stayed for 2 whole weeks helping us to finish this project, and we couldn't have done it without him. I've linked his page down below, so make sure to check out his amazing work. Then it was time for Benni's hairy arms again. The base paint for the shoulder armor was done in dark grey. It's not super visible in the video yet, but the cool thing is just happening in the next step. Using a thick brush, no water and only a little bit of paint, Benni dry brushed on a brighter grey. Little by little, this will make the sanded in texture really come out. Looked really nice, right? Afterwards, he taped over the finished areas with masking tape and began to spray the remaining edges in gold. This paint needed a few layers before it was covering though. Then came some shadows in brown and even more shadows in an even darker brown. This was not all though. The real magic again only happened by dry brushing more gold on top of all of this. As you can see, all the shadows stayed within the texture and lower areas, while the gold only got applied to the edges. This created a really cool weathered ancient paint effect, don't you think? The only thing missing now was a bit of green patina that Xal'atath has all over her armor. Then, unmasking the whole thing, fixing a few flaws, and the paint job of the pauldrons were complete. Just a bit of matte varnish for the grey area and some satin varnish for the edges. Ta-da! Looked really awesome, right? A little bit of hot glue to connect both pieces and my shoulder armor was finished. This was already a lot of work, but honestly we haven't even started yet. Next up was Xal'atath's evil color. I already showed you the paper pattern I made before, and luckily this piece was really not that hard to figure out. I transferred everything to 5mm EVA foam again, glued both pieces together and made sure it fit. A few more foam edges came on top, but also to the inside of the collar. And as always, a ton of texture and battle damage. It's an ancient evil color after all. Now, the same painting steps as for the shoulders, priming with Flex Bond, grey dry brushing for the main parts, masking, then golden edges, shadows, dry brushing more gold, varnish, and done. Just wearing this makes me 200% more evil looking. And it fit perfectly between the pauldrons. Okay, let's continue with the fancy corset. This was one of my favorite parts. And again, I already had a perfect corset pattern ready to go, downloaded from my own shop, kamuicosplay.com. I cut it out, traced all pieces to 5mm EVA foam and glued it all together. The assembly here was really easy. Afterwards, I only had to adjust the shape a bit. Much better. As foam isn't strong enough for a corset though, I used my pattern on some super durable muslin fabric, sewed then all parts together, got a great supporting lining and glued it on using fabric glue into the foam build. And as you can see, yes, you can sew through EVA foam. Now it was finally time to add all the details onto the foam. This is probably a good time to remind you that every costume piece has a point where it looks weird and you're not sure if it will turn out how you hoped. But just trust the process and keep on going. Benni used the 3D model again to create a blueprint for the S-shaped sphere holder at the front. I traced this to foam as well, layered it to make it more thick, sanded the edges round, added a back support and some details, and then attached the whole thing to the front. See, we're getting somewhere. Afterwards, I added some thick triangle dowels to the top and the bottom edge and a few more thin lines to complete everything. By the way, all my foam as well as my contact cement is from Cosplay Shop BE. Absolutely love this online cosplay shop. And after some dremeling work and heat sealing my rough sanded surface, I used my specialty pliers and added a lot of rivets to the back. Really happy how this turned out. Now let's speedrun the painting process. First priming, then grey dry brushing, masking, golden edges and varnish. You know the drill. Now for the purple details, I actually made some patterns a few steps previously. Also during our Canada trip this year, I found a really gorgeous, perfectly fitting Duchess satin. Having already a pattern, cutting and sewing everything together was pretty straightforward. In addition, we also found these awesome golden metal chains in the land of beavers, maple syrup and being sorry. They were just so perfect. I only had to clip them to the right length and then sew them to the inside of my corset. Nice! The bottom part of the purple fabric needed more golden raised edges, so off it was again to Benni and Ali to cut out, prime and paint them for me. A bit of fabric glue here and there to place every piece, and look how pretty it is! Minna was so patient too, good girl. Then this got glued to the inside together with two more purple fabric pieces and knots, where Benni had the honor of figuring out how to make my two magical orbs. For this part we mixed some blue dye into resin and used this one to 3D print the orbs on our resin printer. Around 10 hours later it was done. This was just genius and so much easier than molding and casting those gemstones. The prints were not perfect and needed a little bit of extra sanding, but still pretty awesome. Next on, Benni sprayed the gems with glossy varnish, which made them super shiny, and added then some self-adhesive silver foil to the back. Now only some contact cement was missing and they turned out so good. Finally, Benni quickly modeled, printed, sanded and painted the little pendant that was missing. The gemstone was simply stuck in, everything got attached then to the chain and the corset was done. Oh my god, this was so much work, but it was absolutely worth it. I love the result so much. What do you say? So let's hop over to the bracer next. I made here a simple paper dummy first, traced the shape onto 5mm EVA foam and added a second layer to keep the bracer bended. Just like my shoulder armor, this one then got some raised edges for the details, plus a few additional thinner strips of foam. And of course a lot of texture and battle damage. After priming, dry brushing, masking, airbrushing and more dry brushing, the paint job was also already done. As you can see here in my reference, I also needed some extra belts and a separate purple fabric bracer underneath. So I glued on some Velcro tape with hot glue for the attachments, sewed some fake leather belts, stuck these on as well, added a few golden buckles and waited for Benni to finish my 3D printed gemstone. With this one glued on, all that was missing was my purple fabric bracer. To make it a little bit thicker and less wrinkly, I actually put in some volume fleece using the same pattern. Then, after sewing it all together and turning it inside out, I attached the counterpart of Velcro to the top, closed it at the sides and added a final golden edge to the front. With all of this together, the bracer was also finally finished. Nice! We're making good progress. There was actually also some lower shoulder armor, but since the techniques and work steps were super similar for all those pieces, we keep this part short. Instead, let's talk about the leg armor. Everybody likes leg armor. And if you've seen any of my previous videos, you already know that I started with a duct tape wrap of my leg. After drawing on the pieces and cutting them out, these then got transferred, first onto paper, then onto foam, cut out and glued together. Nice! To make it really easy to get in, I glued in a black zipper and even sewed over it to attach it really well to the foam. Love the result. Next on, I added more triangle dowels, a few more foam strip details, and as always, a ton of texture and battle damage. These legs are made for fighting! After that came primer, a little purple piece at the bottom, and then the usual grey dry brushing, masking, and golden edges. It's always the same steps. Good thing Ali was here to help. Look how happy he is! And the leg armor was done as well. Which leaves us with the largest remaining costume piece, the cape. This one needed a little bit more of engineering. First, we used the in-game model to make sure the dimensions would fit me properly. Next, Benni created a paper pattern and drew on all the details for the swirls. And after printing it out and taping it together, I could make sure the size was fine. So far, so good. Okay, now the real fun could begin. I traced my shape onto the same black fabric that I used for my robe. But for the other side, Benni actually designed me a super cool space fabric in Photoshop. He then ordered it from a fabric printing service and I think it turned out so cool. Now I just had to cut the same shape out of this one and add the two side thingies as well. When it came to sewing everything together, I had a little issue though. As you can see, I have two beautiful corgi babies that constantly need my attention. So it was time to cuddle Minna. Zelda was polite enough to at least wait until I was on the floor before she came for me. After pinning both sides together and cutting away the excess, I just had to flip it inside out and clean up the edges. See, turned out pretty good I think. Just the golden edges were missing. But by now I think you know how these were made and attached, right? A bit of fabric glue here, a bit of fabric glue there, First the outlines, then the inner details, and finally for the attachment. Next, Benni 3D printed me these cool half moon shapes that he then painted golden and connected with more golden chains. I simply had to drill in a small hole into my shoulder armor, pull through a thick cord and attach my chains to it. The back part also got more chains and an additional gemstone pendant. And with this in place, the entire cape was finally done. Just had to pull the ends through the half moon shapes and velcro the top to the back of my robe. Fit perfectly. Okay, this is the moment, guys. All costume pieces were now finished. Everything fit so well together and the attachment worked out as planned. I was super happy with our progress, and all of this in only 3 weeks so far. And I promise, we're almost done as well. Just the wig was still missing. Luckily, I have some awesome friends, like Crystal Cosplay, who offered to help me with my wig again. She started with teasing it to add a bit more volume, and then shortened the bottom. Xal'atath's hair is curved and wild, however, so she also used a steamer and a flexible curling foam thingy. Some oil for the bottom, a bit of glue, extra hair and airbrush color for the hairline, and Xal'atath's wig was done. It looked so good. Crystal is an amazing wig maker, so make sure to check out her channel. So, the wig was done, the costume was done, but as it happened, I forgot to make a few more smaller details. Xalatath has actually a surprising amount of jewelry for a WoW character, and some of it was made out of Wobbler and some were 3D printed. So far, so good. Then I also had to build her necklace. This was made out of foam and painted. For the ears, I used again a pattern from my own shop, camulcosplay.com. And the dark heart, a super powerful artifact Xalatath was fighting for, was made out of foam and a 3D printed resin gemstone. It turned out super pretty as well. Well, and that was it. Are you excited to finally see the finished costume? And I hope you didn't just jump to this point, by the way. So please enjoy the reveal. The makeup and body painting took me 3 hours to complete, by the way, and I'm so proud of how it turned out. Getting into the costume was also not easy with all the paint already applied. But this was the result once we were done. Benni set up some fancy lights and we did all the photos and videos so you can finally enjoy Xalatath in all her glory. We are incredibly proud of this costume and I think Xalatath is one of the best character designs Blizzard pulled out. I think she suits me also really well and Benni did an outstanding job on editing the final photos. How do you like them? Thanks so much for watching and I really hope this video wasn't too long for you, but Xalatath has like so many amazing details and we just wanted to show you like all the tools and materials and techniques we used for her. Also, as always, if you have any questions, just write me a comment down below. And also please let me know how you like the costume because I would love to hear your feedback. And if you don't have any feedback or anything to write or you don't have any questions, please just write down Corgi and join the Corgi squad and support us with the YouTube algorithm. Thank you very much. Benni and I were super proud of how Xalatath turned out, even though we had like only 4 weeks to finish everything. And yeah, it was a super fun project. It was amazing. So thanks a lot to Blizzard for the trust and for this really cool collaboration. I'm now even more excited for the next expansion, the War Within, especially since I'm playing a lot of World of Warcraft right now. And last but not least, as always, please like and subscribe, hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of our upcoming videos. And also a huge thank you to our lovely Patreons for their amazing support. see you very soon in the next video, and I am going to play a lot of World of Warcraft right now. Bye bye.